Thank you for joining us this evening. It is 7 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Stephanie Smith. I am the Director of School Counseling here in Berners Township. I work here at Ridge High School with the outstanding Ridge High School Counseling Department, all to my right. They are a phenomenal group of school counselors, and your children are in great hands with them. We are so excited. We are so excited, thank you, to have you here tonight, and so we want to send a very warm welcome to you as a family, and hopefully this evening will be very helpful and informative to all of you. But before we get started tonight, I do want to take a moment to read you something that was read to your children, all of the students here at Ridge High School this morning to honor September 11th. Today we acknowledge Patriot Day, the National Day of Remembrance for the lives lost during the devastating act of terrorism that occurred on September 11th in 2001. Among the more than 3,000 people who lost their lives were the immediate victims of the attack and many who participated in rescue efforts, our first responders, our heroes. Many Berners Township families lost loved ones, and the community, the country, and the world have been deeply affected by the events on September 11th. This year marks the 22nd anniversary of the attacks and is a day for mourning those who were lost and for celebrating the efforts of the first responders who worked tirelessly in rescue efforts. At this time, to honor both the victims and the heroes, we are asking everyone to observe a moment of silence and reflection beginning now. Thank you. So as we continue this evening, we do want to acknowledge that this is a very special time for your family. So whether this is your first child as a senior, whether this is your second child, whether it's your third or fourth time at the rodeo, this is a huge transitional point. It's very exciting. It comes with a lot of stress, this we know, but we are here to be partners with you. We welcome you to this phase of the journey, and we're looking forward to working together for all that lies in the year ahead. This evening, the team has worked to create a presentation for you that's essentially in two parts. The first part is a PowerPoint presentation, and then we will move into the second part, which is a Q&A session. So you'll be able to ask us questions, and we're here to answer for you tonight. We are being recorded. Thank you to Mr. Barry up there for help this evening. And I will make sure to send out the PowerPoint slides with all of the links to each of you tomorrow. And we will get the recording up on our website as well. So that way tonight you can sit back, you can relax. You don't have to worry about what's on the screen or taking notes. We'll make sure to get it in your hands tomorrow. And with no further ado, I will turn it over to Mrs. Coviello to get us started.
Hello, everyone. So we're going to start out with goals for this meeting. So after this whole presentation, Q&A, one of our goals is to help you feel more confident in this whole post-secondary entire application process and more confident with exactly what your child needs to do in that process. We will discuss students with other post-secondary plans. We are here to help with all post-secondary pathways. Explain how students work with their counselor during this time, introduce our own post-secondary planning site, which is an amazing resource that I'll go into deeper in a slide from now, and present our department's 10 steps to complete the application process. So following this 10 steps will ensure your child will not miss anything and helps everyone stay organized and keep everyone on track. So discussing all post-secondary pathways. So your child can be considering a 2-year college, going to community college, or go straight into a 4-year college. They could want to go straight into the military, go straight to the workforce, take a gap year, or a career or a technical school. So we are here to help with all of those options. And we will review this information individually with students in their meetings and help support them along the way to make them set up for success after high school. So please encourage your child to speak with us, whichever their pathway may be, and we are here to help support them. So, our role as counselors. So what we are here for is to help support and guide our students and your children through and during and throughout the entire process. Answer any questions, whether that be in person, through email, individual meetings with each student, such as we have our own senior conference meetings, and that doesn't have to be our only meeting. We're here throughout the entire year to answer questions, meet again, so we're here to help you through this. And then all of our resources within our own post-secondary planning site. So I'm going to quickly go to our site just as a visual to help you see what all we have to offer. Okay, it's up there. Just want to make sure. So certain things, like on the left-hand side, this is the tabs for all of our specific topics. So as you can see, there are a lot of different things on here. But first of all, I'd like to go through a couple of different ones just to show you what's in these. So for example, the application checklist. This is our 10-step process, which we'll be going in deeper throughout the slides in this presentation. But just to quickly look through, this is a helpful guide to just when in doubt, we have this all on here. For example, such as paying your $7 fee for your transcripts, that's one of the steps, and additional video tutorials within those steps. So if you forget, for example, how to move from colleges I'm thinking about to college I'm applying to, there's a video tutorial on how to do that. So it's all right here. Adding letters of recommendation on Naviance, up until the complete 10th step of completing your application. So you can go through this again. We have the presentation, but when you have time, you and your student can look through it and go over these steps. Also, another tab that I want to show you all is, for example, application information. So this is like specifics while filling out the application. So for example, our GPA scale, our class rank, we don't rank. So GPA weighting, these are all specific kind of questions that you will see while they're filling out their applications, whether on the Common App or their own personal application of the college. So you'll be seeing these questions, and if you don't know the answer to them, they're right here. Or you can just email us. Additionally, we also have college visits that I'd like to talk about. So we have our annual college fair. This is a great resource just to see it right here. That's October 12th. And we have a full list of attending schools, and that will be posted closer to the date. So if you want to check back in, it'll be helpful to see if there's any specific schools that you're interested in. And then college rep visits. So these are held exclusively at Ridge High School and held in the Media Center. So this is a really great way to meet an actual representative from a specific college and ask questions. So these will be held throughout the school day, and your student will sign up on Naviance, and then they'll get a pass in Genesis, and then they'll be able to go to the Media Center and talk with a rep. It's in a group setting, either virtual or in person, but it's a great way to make connections and ask questions if you're on the fence of a specific school or you really want to go there and just want to talk to the rep again. And then just general visiting college campus information. Just like tonight, our presentation. So it's helpful to know what else we have throughout the school year. So this is our whole college planning events, such as our own junior year presentation. We have our financial aid night on December 6th. This is a go-to place to make sure if you don't miss something that maybe you'd want to find out about. And then also helpful, we have all of our presentations recorded and posted on here as a resource. Okay? And something new as well is planning by grade on the top left. Oh, you can see my little thing. Okay, good. So for example, I'm going to click 11th grade planning. So this is just general recommendations, such as like, I'm a junior year student, what should I be thinking about right now in regards to college planning, such as if you're a parent with a junior year student and not just a senior year, it's helpful to look through this. So this doesn't always have to happen in sequential order, just like a general guideline. Such as in the fall, we're reviewing the schedule, going into the winter, meeting with your counselor for your junior conference. The spring, it starts to get busy, such as like considering what teachers you want to write letters of rec, visiting college campuses, and then all the way into the summer, like what you should be thinking about the summer before senior year. So it's kind of it's a really helpful go-to, just to see what you should be like thinking about. And then lastly, we just have other helpful tips, such as like essay writing, exploring careers, financial aid, military options is all right here in our post-secondary site. So I just wanted to show you visually on what we all have to offer on here. And that is it, I think. I mean, there's a lot that I didn't go over, so when you have time, check that out, okay? So I will hand this over to Ms. Marcella, who's going to take over. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Morcella. I'm covering for Mrs. McGivney. So some of you your child may have Mrs. McGivney. I will be with them for the next couple months, pretty much till the end of October, so taking them through the process, the early process. So before we begin talking about the steps involved, we just want to go through some of the basics of college admissions planning. So there's various type of admissions policies. So when you're applying, you have to start deciding which way you want to apply to a college. So you have your regular decision, where that is basically the application process in which a student submits an application to their college by a specific date and receives a decision within a certain amount of time. It's a clearly stated time when you will hear back from that college. So a student may apply to as many institutions as they want under that way without any restrictions. So that is your regular decision. You may also choose to do an early decision college, and that is where you can only apply to one college as an early decision candidate. That is a binding contract that your child would have to decide that they want to only apply there as early decision, and if they get in, they have to go there. So there's a contract that they sign, you sign, and then the counselor signs as well. If in the meantime, while they're waiting for their early decision, kind of to find out if they got in, if they've applied to other colleges and then get into their early decision, they do have to contact the other colleges to just basically withdraw their applications. The deadline is much earlier, hence why it's called early decision, but it's usually around November 1st or November 15th, and typically the college will let the student know by December 15th or January 1st. So that is one way to apply. Another way is early action. So it's similar to early decision in that the student would apply early, and again, usually around that November 1st, November 15th window. But if they get in, they don't have to go there, but they would still find out early. So that is another way that they could, apply to college. There's also, so it gets kind of a little interesting, because then there's single choice early action. So again, if you're all confused by this, could cover it again on presentations and on the website. But so single choice early action is where an early choice that is not binding upon a candidate, but prohibits a student from applying to other colleges under an early action or early decision agreement. So again, they're applying early, but if they do a single choice early action, even though they're not bound to go there, they can't apply to other schools under the early programs. Then you may have a priority or preferred application, where the admissions office sets internal deadlines to gauge the number of applicants and to give scholarships consideration. The application is often divided into sections with a separate deadline for each section. Examples are priority or preferred deadline dates, along with regular decision, rolling or early action deadline dates. So they might have a couple different deadlines, and you could decide how you want to apply. Sometimes with those priority applications, they might also waive the application fee as a means for attracting more applicants. And then you have colleges that are what's called rolling admissions. So that, again, is not something a student chooses, but basically they apply, the college will make a decision and let you know. So it's kind of on a rolling basis. There still is usually a deadline, maybe later in the year, but if you apply early, you may find out early. And then there's colleges which offer open admissions, and those are generally maybe two-year colleges, and basically that's a policy of some colleges of admitting virtually all academic high school graduates with minimal attention to high school grades and admissions test scores. So basically your county colleges are a good example of that. So other than that, as far as applying, there are 3 types of applications your child may use to apply, and some schools may take more than one type of application. So generally, we recommend students use the first one, which is the common application. So that is what we link to our Naviance program. So that generally, if a college offers that, we do recommend the student do use the common application because we can link the letters of recommendations, and their teacher recommendation letters will get linked to that. So it just makes a nice, clean package sent over there. There's also the coalition application. So that's another application option used by colleges in addition to other options such as the common application. So again, if the college, many colleges may offer both the common app and the coalition app, but we recommend use the common app. And then there's some colleges that have just university-specific applications, and it's only used by that college. So your child may choose which application to submit, and they could discuss it with their counselor at any time. So another thing before the steps, I know Ms. Coviello had pointed out that we do have college visits that come to Ridge High School. And so there's currently probably quite a few already scheduled to come starting in, I think, this week, right? I think is where they start. So your child can visit the counselor Google Classroom. They can sign up for visits in the counselor's Google Classroom. There's instructional videos on the website, how to use that. I'm not going to click on that now. Most of those visits will either be in person or they might be virtual depending upon the college preference. So virtual visits will still be in the high school, and basically the student would use their Chromebook in the media center. And then something new that we're starting this year is that the counselors will be hosting workshops on various topics that are kind of niche to like colleges admissions. Seniors can sign up also via the counselor's Google Classroom, and topics are listed on the flyer, which you can click here when you're back home, including getting started. So some of them are getting started on applications, completing the common application, essay writing, filling out the SRAR, which we'll talk about later. So just it's a good resource for just more specific and more individualized help. Okay, so now we're ready for step 1. So what your child should do first from our list of steps. So the majority of them have turned in Senior Packet Part A, and that was due at the end of June of their junior year. So that was the one piece that the student had to fill out a piece, as well as there was a parent brag sheet in there. So we thank you for filling that out as well. So that was due Part A, and now we have Part B coming up. So we're asking students to complete that by September 20th. So again, those are 2 parts that just help the counselor make sure the student is on track with their application process, as well as it also helps in writing letters of recommendation too. So again, the Google Classroom that the counselors all have is where they'll find the assignments, and they'll submit it as they would any other Google Classroom assignment right on there. And so, again, like I said, Part A helps us write the letter of recommendation, and Part B is a communication tool to help us know that your child is ready for their individual meeting, and also helps us know deadlines. So we want to make sure that, we make those deadlines too, so. And then the other part, so step 2 on the application part is kind of paying a transcript fee. So there is a one-time $7 transcript fee, and that's regardless of how many transcripts are sent. It includes the initial transcript, the mid-year grades, and then also the final transcript. So when they decide which college they're going to, and the last transcript after they graduate is sent. We can't send any transcripts without the payment completed. Want to make sure that when you are kind of doing the transcript fee, you only pay for it once, because we cannot give refunds. Also, because of deadlines and things like that, it does take a few days for it to be processed. So try to pay it sooner rather than later, so that way you're not trying to rush to get transcripts set and things like that. As far as paying that fee, there's a video tutorial for that one, so you could check that out if you want more help on how to fill that out. But it's basically on the school website with a credit card. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Wu, who's going to go to the next, oops, wrong button. There you go. Okay, I'll let you do that. There you go.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So I am going to talk about Naviance, but before I talk about the slide, just in case some of you guys don't know what Naviance is, I'm going to go through and actually give a live demo on how to utilize this tool, which I'm really excited about because I love using Naviance, and there's a lot of great information on here, and I actually haven't done a live demo for it in many years, so this is kind of fun for us to do that. So just to kind of give you some background on Naviance, for those of you guys who may not know what it is, it's a tool that your students can use, and they have access to it really from sophomore year is kind of when we've had them utilize it. They go on and do a career inventory and learn a little bit about their personality and what careers might match their personality type. And then in junior year, students can start signing up for college visits in the fall, and we really use it a lot during senior year, and I'll go through, some of the information that they will be using it for during their senior year. Naviance, just so that everybody knows, is a web-based app which houses information about the many colleges and universities that are out there, and the information on here is also Ridge specific, so you'll be able to see admissions stats for students from Ridge High School that applied to all these schools, and then the information about your own child is something that only the Ridge staff can see. So when you go on there and you see test scores and GPA, that's just information that we see. That's not something that's accessible by the colleges. So this is our sample student, Sarah student, and this is the main page. Students have their own account, and as parents, you guys can actually have access to your own parent account as well. So if you don't have access to that and would like to, you can reach out to our counseling department secretaries and they can set you up with that. If you already had a child go through Ridge and this whole college process and you want to have the accounts linked, you can just reach out to them as well and they can help with that. You can only have one email registered, so that's why you have to link the account. So if you log in and you're seeing Johnny who graduated in 2012, you can just let us know and we can link that account so you can access your children that are still at Ridge. So on the main page here, there's not a lot that's different if you have seen it before. They do have some things that they've kind of pulled to the main page for you to look at. For example, Sarah's future planning, where they can select a path like 2-year, 4-year school, things like that. I'll try to just give you guys the highlights. There's a lot of information on here that's great, but if you look on this little icon where it's your student's initials. If they click on My Account, they would see their GPA, which has been updated to reflect the end of junior year. You can also access that in Genesis. On here, you can also see test scores if they have reported it to us and it's been uploaded. So that would be your SAT, ACT scores. If they want that information on here, they can actually just send us the report if it's not on here, and we can upload it if it's been a while since the test date. It does take a couple weeks for it to get uploaded, so give it a couple weeks, and then if it's not there and you want that information there, just let us know. I mentioned careers before, which is something that sophomores were introduced to Naviance for. They can still use the information on here. If your son or daughter knows about a career that they're interested in, they can explore more about what that career has to offer, certain majors that will help you get to that career, and then you can also tie that to schools that might offer that major and kind of help them if they're still looking for other schools to apply to right now. Self-discovery just has different inventories that students can utilize if they want to explore that. Some of these features too, if you're on the parent account and you're not seeing it, it's most likely because it's just on the student account. Colleges, this is the part that seniors will utilize heavily. So we've actually mentioned a few different things on here already. If students still want to search for schools, they can look at the advanced college search and search for schools that way. College visits was mentioned a lot. This is where students would sign up for visits. So if they click on college visits, they'll see all the different schools that are visiting Ridge. You have to sign up at least 24 hours in advance, so that's why the deadline has passed for some of the schools. So students can log in through here and sign up for those visits. Under colleges, we mentioned moving schools from colleges I'm thinking about to colleges I'm applying to. So this will actually help us keep track of the schools that students are applying to and how they're applying to these schools and the deadlines. When students start requesting transcripts, which is done through the student account, they would go on here to request transcripts, and you can kind of track that stuff on here as well. And one other thing I do want to mention is the scholarship search. If you look up scholarships on here, it's constantly updated to include local scholarships that come through our office. So this is something that students should continuously check to see what's on there. You have to go on and just look at scholarships search, not like the national scholarship search section. So this will list different scholarships that have come through our office, and then we upload the information. There are also different programs that are available for students that we'll upload on here, so it's not just scholarships, even though that's what that list is called. And then just as a last piece too, if you are interested in learning about those stats that I mentioned, if you look up a specific school, I'm just gonna, let me see. Look at Alabama on here. So you'll see school-specific information on here. Always make sure you're checking the school's actual website as well. And then if you look under admissions, this is where you'll see information that is Ridge-specific as to how many students applied and were accepted. And then you also have the scattergram, which shows you students from Ridge High School that applied and were accepted to whatever school you're looking at as well. So that is what you can see on Naviance. And just to kind of go back to our slides here, I talked about having to move schools from colleges I'm thinking about over to colleges I'm applying to. So that would be step 3 of what students should be doing when they're ready, so we can kind of keep track of the schools that they are looking at. And then if they need a video tutorial, we do have that online when you guys get this slideshow. Step 4 has to do with making a common application account. So as we mentioned before, if your students' schools utilize Common App, we do encourage that you use that. You'll have one application that you're submitting to multiple schools. And there is information on here that students have to start entering so that we can kind of work with them to ensure that their documents on our end are able to be sent. And then, they would just continue to work on the application as they see fit through the next couple weeks. So we have some highlights here where students need to enter information in the education section, and we do have information and videos that students can watch to be able to see what they need to do on here. This is basic information. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And on the Common App, the questions here are things like how many students are in your graduating class, what's your GPA, and that type of information. As we mentioned before, we do have a post-secondary site that has all of this information. Ms. Coviello showed you the application information on here that was, that can be utilized for all applications, but we do have a section that is specific to the Common application. So if your son or daughter is having trouble with Common App and they have some questions on how to fill that out, they can go onto this page and check out the answers there. So on the left-hand side, we have the general application information, and then this page is specific to Common Application. So moving on to the next step, this is something that ties Common App with Naviance. So as we mentioned, we utilize Naviance for a lot. Because we are a Naviance school, for any schools that utilize Common Application, our documents are sent and matched up with them. So what you need to do for that to happen is there's something called the FERPA waiver in Common App that needs to be completed. The waiver will ask your son or daughter if they want to waive their right to view the letter of recommendations that are written by the counselor and their teachers. Your choices are yes or no. Selecting yes would mean yes, they waive their right to see those letters. No would mean they don't waive their right. And again, we do have a video tutorial on how that's done. It only needs to be done once after that education section is complete in Common App, and then it'll apply to all the schools that are loaded on Common Application. So just to kind of give you some information on waiving your right or not. If a student does choose to waive their right, it reassures colleges that the recommendation is candid and truthful. So it just lets the schools know that there was no, influence on the letter. People weren't worried about other people seeing the letter, so it's, more genuine. And then in terms of not waiving your right, some schools may not, put as much weight on that letter of recommendation, so that's something to just consider when you are doing that. One thing to remember too is once you do the FERPA waiver, you cannot change it. So make sure you are actually checking the right box, whichever one it is that you want to check off there. And then there is a matching process that happens in Naviance. So back on that colleges I'm applying to section, there was a little button that says Match Common Application, and students will just go on and click that button, and then that will allow us to be able to send transcripts, letters, and other supporting documents out to the schools that students are applying to once they request those transcripts. So your son or daughter can do this after they create a Common App account, after they add at least one school, they complete the education and the FERPA sections on Common Application, and then if your son or daughter, has had a teacher who's saying, hey, I tried to submit the letter of recommendation, but I can't do that. One of the reasons could be that they haven't completed this yet. So we can't send any documents until this section is complete and the matching happens between the two accounts. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is teacher letters of recommendation. So if your son or daughter has not already touched base with a teacher to go over who's writing their letters and if they're writing it and what they need, they definitely should be doing that as soon as possible, especially if they have applications that are due in November or December. Once your son or daughter has done that, they should log into Naviance, and then they can add the recommendation requests on Naviance. Most of the teachers at Ridge are using Naviance to write letters, so they want to make sure that they are adding them on Naviance and not adding them on Common App as an other recommender or anything. If they have specific questions, just have them come down and see us, but they want to make sure that they are adding those teachers on there, and then also adding them to the schools that they want the teacher to send it to. And again, if they have questions on whether they should select all schools or just specific schools, they can let us know. When a student is going to add a teacher, it will also show you how many letters a school accepts, so they want to make sure they pay attention to that in case they have more teachers writing than are allowed, because then they want to make sure they select the specific teachers that they want to send letters to that school. In terms of teacher letters too, just, same as counselor letters, copies aren't provided to your child, so that's something to keep in mind. And then they should also just make sure they touch base with their teachers to give them enough time to write those letters. And if there are any changes, to just make sure they're always reaching out to the teacher to let them know if any deadlines change as well. And now I'm going to pass this on.
Okay, so I'm going to finish up with the last couple of steps that we have in our 10-step process. And the 7th step is our Google form. So we recently all posted Google Forms in our classroom that all students will be able to access and submit as an assignment. And the reason that we created this is so that students can effectively let us know when they're ready to have their senior meeting. So their senior meeting is a 30, 45-minute meeting, depending on how much your student needs, where we will go over more in depth their application, what questions they have, where they are in the process. And this form is really what helps us know that they're ready for that meeting and that they've already done the previous 6 steps that they will need to do before that. If a student is not applying via the Common App, they're using maybe a school-specific application or something different, we have a note in here that there are certain steps that they wouldn't have to do because it only applies to the Common App. So just make sure that if they're not using that, they're checking out what steps they're doing. So this helps us make sure that we schedule the student. They got the same information this morning. We just ask that whenever they submit it, they give us a day or two to get back to them and offer up an appointment slot that works for their schedule and our schedule, so that we can set up some time to meet to go over their applications. And as Ms. Morsella mentioned, Senior Packet Part B had students write in their first deadlines that will be coming up. And so we will try to meet with everyone way before their first deadlines. We absolutely always meet with students before they need to submit their documents. So that's why we just ask that they let us know through this form. Okay, so test scores is a really big part of the process, and one question that we get all the time is, are my students' test scores on their transcript from Ridge, or are you guys sending them on their behalf? And unfortunately, no, they're not part of our transcript here, so the student will need to send them either through ACT or College Board for the SAT test. We'll talk a bit about a couple of nuances with sending test scores, but the majority of students will be sending them through either one of these 2 websites, and that will create what's called an official score report, and that will go straight to the school from the testing agency. So the student will log into their account on either of those testing agencies, and they'll have to enter in the school that they're planning to send it to. And then we listed the fees that either SAT or ACT has for students to send those to colleges. But there's a lot of nuances with standardized testing, as I mentioned, and something that's been really popular within the last couple of years is test optional policies. So many schools have continued to have test optional policies after COVID. They've found that it works for them. And so many of the schools that your students apply to might have those test optional policies still. So what we would say is we encourage students to just check the websites and make sure that they meet all the criteria for that test optional policy. And if they do, they're not required to send their test scores to that school if they don't want to. So they certainly can send them if they feel like it would help their application or if they want to send them, but test optional means that it's not required in order for the school to make a decision on them. Some schools also take self-reported standardized test scores, so it depends on the school, but there are a handful out there. And that would mean that they would ask your student somewhere in their application for them to actually just manually enter what they received on these tests and submit that as their test score. So they do eventually get the official test report in the future if they decide to go to that school. So we let them know this morning. They, of course, have to be accurate and honest with that. But it does save an extra step in the process, especially if there are schools that your student can self-report to and they might not attend. It saves some time and money and all of that if they are able to do that on those applications. If your child is done testing, they are not planning to take another SAT or not planning to take another ACT, and they are planning to send scores to colleges, we would encourage them to do that as soon as possible. It can sometimes take a couple of weeks to get from the testing agencies to the schools. So the sooner they go in and request those to be sent to their colleges, the better. It does not matter what gets to a college first, so if they're not done with their application, but they know that they're done with testing, they're welcome to send that now and then finish up their application in time. There is something called rush reporting. You might see that on either SAT or ACT. And we really encourage students to not rush report in any situation. A lot of schools will either not accept rush reporting, it costs like an exorbitant amount of money, so we would really encourage students to just plan ahead and make sure that they're sending them the regular way. If your child is still planning to take some more additional tests, maybe an ACT or an SAT again in the future, that's totally fine. They just want to make sure that when they're getting those scores back, they're assessing, am I ready to have those sent? Every time a student does take an SAT or ACT, they are asked when they're sitting there during the test administration if they want to send it to up to a couple of schools for free that day. They can do that. The only thing to be aware of is they're sending it and they're going to see the scores as soon as the school sees the scores as well. So some students would rather see the score first and then send them out, and that's totally fine as long as there is an ample turnaround time. A lot of students also ask about AP testing. We have a lot of students that do take AP courses throughout their time at Ridge, and we just want to let everyone know that is not generally part of the application process, is to send those AP scores. Now, the schools will see the AP class listed on the student's transcript as well as what they received in that class, but typically figuring out with the college what credits they'll be given for those AP tests happens after they've committed to a school rather than during the process. Okay. So one of the last steps in the process is requesting transcripts. This is a super easy step that's done through Naviance. Similar to all of our other steps, we have video tutorials on how to do this, so students can check that out either in the slides or on our post-secondary website. But transcript requests are made in Naviance only. Sometimes we have students here and there emailing us, hey, can you send this transcript for me? I wish we could do it that way, but everything does need to be done through Naviance so that we can make sure we track it and make sure it's received. Transcripts can't be requested until the student has submitted both their senior packets, they've paid their transcript fee, and they've met with us for their senior meeting. So it's really important that they have that meeting so that way when they leave, they can request those transcripts. And then something we'll talk a little bit more on later is the SRAR, but some schools don't require us to send a transcript. They actually require this form called the SRAR, which is a self-reported academic record. And that means that they are basically giving your student a form where they're asking the student to type in the classes and grades into that form that they've taken throughout their time at Ridge. And why that's helpful for them is everything is then in a more streamlined place for colleges when they're reviewing all of the paperwork that they get for students. But students just need to be on top of making sure that that school has that form and that they've completed it within the timeline they need to. So once they're ready to request transcripts, students should just look into whether they need an official transcript for that school, whether there's an SRAR or any form that they need to do. A couple of big schools that are very popular amongst Ridge students do take this form, like Rutgers and Penn State and Pittsburgh, so it's definitely something that's commonly used. And the actual process of requesting transcripts on Naviance is super, super quick. It's really just clicking boxes for the schools that the student wants to request them for, and then requesting them. And they can do all of their schools at one time, or if they're ready to do one application and they want to start with that, and then they want to come back later for the other ones, that's okay too. So then the last step that we have, which sounds kind of silly, is completing the applications. But there's a lot more to completing the application than just submitting it. So obviously there are pretty strict deadlines with college applications, so we want to make sure we're submitting it before that deadline. and making sure that it's not only submitted, but it's paid for, and all of that on the college's website or through the Common App to avoid any sort of trouble with that. A really great resource if students are running into issues with the Common App is actually their help center. They have a great email address. They have a chat usually that you can access if you have questions specifically about the Common App, just because we can access students' information through Naviance, but not necessarily through Common App. Essays are a big part of the application. Obviously, we spoke a little bit about essay writing, but the essays should be done well in advance before they're submitting the application. The Common App has one main essay, which is probably the essay that students are usually talking about the most. So we did link the prompts for the Common App in here in this presentation. They're, of course, on their website as well. And students should not make that Common App essay related to any of the schools that they're applying to, because it goes to every school that they're applying to. So we want to avoid making it specific for any one place. Most colleges have supplemental essays as well, which are shorter essay questions that they ask students to fill out about potentially their school or their chosen field of study. So it's just to learn a little bit more about the student. Not necessarily as long as the Common App essay by any means, but they want to make sure that they're carving out some extra time for those supplemental questions as well, if the schools they're applying to have them. There are schools out there that don't, but they would see that in the Common App if that's where they're applying. And then lastly, I know Ms. Marcella mentioned early decision and how that's a binding agreement, and she mentioned that there would be a contract that students, parents, counselors, everyone has to sign. And so that early decision contract will happen as the student submits the application. After they click submit, there will be a form for them to sign. You guys will sign it as well, and then it gets popped over to us so we can approve, yes, we know the student is applying early decision, meaning that they are confirming that they're going to attend that school if they get in. So I am going to turn it over to Ms. Kukuro.
Okay, at this point in the presentation, we have made it through the 10 steps. Woohoo! We hope that you feel at this point that there is a sequential, step-by-step process for you to follow, and so you'll feel like as you check off those steps that you haven't missed anything and that you're following a procedure and that there's nothing that you didn't do. So that's the hope here. I'm going to take you through a couple other important things that we want to talk about in this process, but first I want to talk about the awesome meetings that we had with your children today. I know a couple other people have mentioned that we said this or that to the kids today. We had these group meetings where we presented very much the same presentation to your child today. There were 4 counselors in this main pack setting. There were 2 of us in the back to the right, and there were 2 of us on the other side. And it was early in the morning. It was 8:30, and we asked them to put their cell phones away. And the feedback after these meetings across the board amongst all counselors was the same. It was they were paying attention, they were engaged, they were listening, and we complimented them. And I want to compliment you as parents because they did an awesome job this morning. And so hopefully they feel empowered and armed with the information and ready to go and knowing that we're here to support them. And it was just really a nice time this morning to meet with them and talk and kick off this process. So we mentioned the SRAR. That stands for Self-Reported Academic Record. It is a list of courses and grades that are associated with the high school and also college credit. It replaces the high school transcript during the admissions review process. So what that means is that colleges that are looking for an SRAR do not accept transcripts or other documents from us as the counseling department. It means that they want your student to input information by themselves. We did link here a list of the schools that use the SRAR. Some popular ones are there: Rutgers, University of Delaware, Penn State, and University of Pittsburgh. Those are ones that have done it over the past couple of years, but there is a mostly comprehensive list on that link there. We recommended to your students today that since accuracy is important and they are the ones that are kind of transcribing from one to the next, is that they have a copy of their high school transcript when they are doing the SRAR in front of them. So we said either pull it up on one screen and kind of look back and forth, or print it out. You can get the copy of that transcript in Genesis, and just make sure that they're copying whatever is on the transcript over onto the computer, because that is the expectation from the college. They're not wanting the transcript from us, they're wanting the student to record that information on this SRAR. Okay, this is an important piece that we told kids today too. On a drop-down menu, it's going to ask what type of classes they are. We want to just make like a public service announcement for students not to choose standard as any option. All courses here at Ridge High School are either CP, honors, or AP. Standard is actually a lower class than CP, so we want to just make sure that students know that nothing is standard here. We get that question often, and it can be confusing for students, so it should be CP, honors, or AP. Okay, so how do they find the SRAR? Where do they get it? Where does it come from? There's a couple different options here. The one that we recommend is the easiest. There's a link, hyperlink there, where students can link each school that uses the SRAR to one form, or they can find it after they submit the application or in their student portal. But it's important that they kind of know which schools are using the SRAR so they're not missing that critical piece of the application, because that is where the college is going to be reviewing a transcript as if we were sending it from the high school. So students should not be requesting transcripts through Naviance for schools that use SRAR, because they just don't want it from us. If they, for some reason, request that transcript by accident, it's not a big deal. We will just delete that request because we know that they're not looking for it from us. Okay, important tips. So a lot of questions, it's kind of like a running joke in the department that a lot of times we get asked questions and our answer is, and you'll hear it in the question and answer part of this evening, is it depends on the college. That's something that we say a lot. Something else we say a lot, and we cannot stress enough and reiterate, is check the individual school's websites. And why is that important? It is because every college does things slightly differently, just to make your lives fun and interesting. What that means is they may have like a test optional policy that may just be listed in general as test optional. But when you go to the website and you find the application checklist of the particular school or the information on their admissions page, well, you find out that it's only test optional if you have a certain GPA. So you wouldn't otherwise know that unless you headed to their particular website and kind of like read the fine print. And just made sure that you're aware of each school, what they're doing. Maybe you're doing a specific academic program that wants like a certain type of teacher letter, and you're only going to find that on the specific college website. So we told the students today, for every school you're applying to, go to their admissions page, find their application checklist or what their requirements are, and just make sure you're reading through those and you're not missing anything that you otherwise might have missed if you just headed to the Common App and did the application and submitted it and thought, okay, cool, I'm done. That was happening a lot last year, so we wanted to make sure this year that we said, make sure you're going to the particular website so that you're familiar with that particular school and what it is that they are looking for. Okay, so in addition to, we talked about the common application essay that's going to go to every school. Some schools are asking for separate supplemental essays that should also be done with the same amount of care and concern that the regular essays are done with. We remind students to research the school, know what they're talking about. Those can be specific to the school, unlike the Common App essay. And they can talk with us about any questions they might have about those, or if they're unsure about what to write. Like, that's a great thing for them to discuss with us, but to know that those are just as important as that main common application essay. And that will vary from school to school. Okay, so what's next? You did the 10 steps, you're feeling good, you went through all our process, and then now what? Okay, this is the time where we hit submit on the applications, and now we're like, oh, what should we be doing now? So you should be checking the status, your students should be checking the status of their applications. And how do they do that? They're going to check the college portal of the particular schools just to see if materials were submitted and they have recorded that they have them. So we want to make note here that if your child receives a notification from a college through an email or some other posting in the portal that says something to the effect of, we don't have this, or we're missing this part of your application, the first thing you should do is not panic. This is a very, very, very common occurrence whereby a college batch sends out emails to however many students saying we're missing things, sometimes before checking to see what it is that they have like sitting in their cyberspace portal that they just haven't recorded yet. Okay, so as you can imagine, they're getting thousands and thousands of documents from schools all over the world, and it just takes time for human beings to record that things have been received. So if you're missing something, do not panic. We generally advise that students reach out to the particular school. They can call with their name. I'm from Ridge High School. I got this notification that something is missing. Can you check and see if it is in fact missing? 99% of the time, we hear back. They have it, they just haven't recorded it yet. If for some strange reason it landed in cyberspace and they don't have it, you want to ask the question, how would you like to receive that? Should we fax it? Should we send it to a particular email? I called a college last year that told me they didn't have my letter of recommendation, which went in the same electronic file as the transcript, which they had. So it happens. It's okay. It's not to penalize the student. We'll figure it out. We will send it. We have never, ever had a problem. Just figure out if they actually need something and how they want to get it, and let us know, and we will help. Okay. First marking period grades. So these are sent automatically to the colleges. It is the one time that a college will see an individual marking period. So obviously we told students today, do the best you can, because it's the only time they're going to see an individual marking period worth of grades. We do have an opt-out policy, meaning if you don't want your scores sent, your grades, I'm sorry, you can fill out the request to withhold marking period 1 grades from colleges. If students are unsure, they can ask us, I'm not sure, I don't know if I should submit. They can talk to us, and but at the end of the day, if they really don't want them sent, they can fill out this form, with the caveat that if a college does reach out to us after that fact and says, listen, we're looking for these grades, sometimes that happens with early decision applicants, we want the grades, we need them, we do have to send them in that case, even if they filled out that form. So if the college is coming to us, we're going to be sending those grades. So again, just encourage your students to do the best they can this marking period so they can showcase the best they can. Okay, mid-year reports. This is a question we get a lot. These are sent automatically too. The students today were very happy to hear there's nothing they need to do to have this happen because we do it automatically. What it is it's the senior year courses only. It is 1 grade per class. It is an average of the first and second marking period grade, averaged together. So all the classes, 1 grade per class, and an updated GPA, which includes freshman, sophomore, junior, and then the half of senior year. So that's kind of a checkpoint for colleges as well as first marking period to see how your student is doing throughout the year, and it happens automatically to all the colleges to which they have applied. So they don't have to do anything. There's no opt-out. They all want to see it, and we automatically send it through our department. Okay. Final reminders. We told students today, just another reminder about social media etiquette. Okay, just be careful about what you post on any social media platform. This includes like accepted students' websites or whatever can be seen. And you know, once it's out there, it's out there. And we just reminded them that. Appropriate email addresses, we told them they should be checking their email. It did have a situation last year where a student had gotten several emails from a college and just wasn't opening them. And the college would say, I sent 8 emails to this kid and he never opened it. So just make sure that that is happening as well, that they're checking their email and that they're appropriate on every platform that is online. Okay, financial aid information. You see up there the FAFSA and the CSS profile. These are how students are applying for need-based and merit-based aid. The FAFSA is free application for federal student aid. Okay, we recommend generally that all families fill out the FAFSA, even if you think that you might not qualify. Sometimes scholarships are awarded and are interested in the information on the FAFSA, so we just recommend that everybody fills it out. The CSS profile is required by some colleges in addition to the FAFSA. It asks a couple different types of questions. It's college specific. There's a list of schools that take it. If your college takes it, unlike the FAFSA, there is a small nominal fee for submitting it. So that's a little bit of a difference there, but it depends on the particular school. We do have a financial aid night co-hosted that's coming up in December of this year. It's December of this year, which is different from last year. The FAFSA this year, if you go on any website, you're going to see the word simplification or simplify. They are trying to make an easier version of the FAFSA for families to complete, so they are rolling it out a little bit later this current school year than they did last year. Last year, it was available October 1st. This year, it's available at some point in December, and we haven't been told yet exactly what that date is. But we are hosting that financial aid night in December, where an expert will come tell you much more than the general information that we're sharing here tonight. Every college is going to have a deadline specific to financial aid documents, so just make sure, again, you're checking with the individual college to make sure you're not missing those deadlines for the particular school. Okay, I do want to click on this link here, our counseling events calendar. A couple people have talked about different things throughout the presentation. You are sitting in the first one listed here. The college fair is next on October 12th in the Ridge High School main gymnasium. Financial aid night, as I mentioned, is here on the last part of the first page. And then we've talked about the rep visits and the college and career counselor workshop series. Those are listed there as well as the dates and the topics and what we're doing. So we are, trying to help, hosting a lot of different things, a lot of opportunities here. So you can click on that counseling calendar of events to come back and see if it's anything that you are interested in. Okay. It's time to shift gears a little bit. We've come to the end of the presentation, and we want to take a moment to highlight the important and influential role you play as parents during the college application season. Tonight, we've gone over the policies and the procedures and told you all the how-tos, but now we want to take a step back and talk about an equally important aspect of college planning, the emotional piece. As counselors, we want to remind you that your child is likely experiencing a lot of feelings about applying to college and what their lives after high school will look like. What we find year after year is that this is a time always filled with a great deal of mixed emotions. In our offices, we see everything from pure excitement and joy to uncertainty and fear. Applying to college and all that follows is by nature a lot of unknowns for students. What we know about unknowns is that they are unpredictable, which inevitably leaves a lot to the imagination. While that can be fun, new, and exciting, it can be scary too. With this in mind, what I'd like you to do at this moment is recall a time as an adult that you faced some unknowns or a period of uncertainty in your own life. Remember how you felt. More importantly, I want you to reflect on who was helpful to you at that time and what they did that was meaningful to you. Who was that person? What did they say? Was it what they said or just how they said it? What did you appreciate about this person? As you think of your scenario, what you may be recalling is someone who was there for you and supported you in some way, whether it was to calm your nerves or join in your enthusiasm. Whatever they did or said, I'll bet it was just whatever you needed at that moment. This is who you can be right now for your child, and I'll tell you why this is so important. I want you to think back to that child who, many years ago, was starting his or her first day of kindergarten with either nervousness or excitement or both. Maybe they reached up to hold your hand or asked for one extra hug and you happily obliged. Or perhaps you helped them pick out a special outfit for the first day of school, or you left a sweet little note in their lunchbox to remind them just how much you cared. The point is, you just knew what they needed and you sent them off with love. Fast forward, and you find yourself as parents, once again, getting ready to send them off again. Instead, this time it's not elementary school, it's college. And so you ask yourself, just like that night before kindergarten, how can I best support my child? Knowing my child better than anyone else in this whole world, what can I do that would be most helpful to him or her? During this college application season, you have a beautiful opportunity to be your child's cheerleader and biggest supporter through their unknowns. And even more importantly, the safe space for them to land no matter what the outcome of this process brings. While it may not be that same little hand reaching up for yours as it was years ago, it is that same set of eyes that will look to you for support, encouragement, understanding, and ultimately approval. And so it is our hope that you will do just that and provide them with all of those things as you once again prepare to send them off with love. You can be the person with whom, years later, they remember sharing this exciting time. And maybe one day, if they are asked to recall a time where someone helped them through uncertainty, they will think of this time in their lives, and they will immediately think of you. The passage I'm about to read is called "Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be" by Frank Bruni, and is written by a father to his son, Matt. It communicates this simple message: I am proud of you no matter what. We encourage you to echo his sentiments in your own special way to your own child during this time. Our hope is that this passage helps shape your perspective as you navigate the important role you play on this journey to the next chapter of your child's life. Dear Matt, on the night before you received your first college response, we wanted to let you know that we could not be any prouder of you than we are today. Whether or not you get accepted does not determine how proud we are of everything you have accomplished and the wonderful person you have become. That will not change based on what admissions officers decide about your future. We will celebrate with joy wherever you get accepted, and the happier you are with those responses, the happier we will be. But your worth as a person, a student, and our son is not diminished or influenced in the least by what these colleges have decided. If it does not go your way, you'll take a different route to get to where you want. There is not a single college in this country that would not be lucky to have you, and you are capable of succeeding at any of them. We love you as deep as the ocean, as high as the sky, all the way around the world and back again, and to wherever you are headed. Love, Mom and Dad. I did it. No tears.
All right, thank you to our presenters so far. For those of you who have just joined us, at this point we will transition to the Q&A part of the evening. So we have prepared with us some questions that we do receive frequently. So we have our own frequently asked questions, but of course we're here to take your questions. So if you have a question, simply just raise your hand, and we have some counselors with microphones, and they will come to you for the microphone. I also just want to send a friendly reminder that we are recording, and so we just ask that you keep your questions for general purposes so that they may benefit the whole group of us here tonight. Anything individual pertaining to you and your child specifically, of course, we're here to answer, and you can just contact us one-on-one at any time after tonight. Okay? And with that, we'll take it away.
Okay. All right, so first, I just want to thank my colleagues for doing such an amazing job kicking off the presentation tonight. Another round of applause for the team. Okay, as Mrs. Smith said, this is our Q&A section. It is my favorite part of the presentation, and it's not because I get to feel like a game show host and run around with the microphone, but because we really like to interact with our families, and you guys ask such really great questions. In fact, I remember last year at the junior presentation, I was so impressed with the questions that were asked. And I am hoping for the same type of energy tonight. I am joined by my office neighbors, Miss Merriview and Miss Cahill, to help with the answers of tonight's presentation. A special shout out to Miss Cahill, who is not only answering questions from the counseling perspective, but also from the perspective of a senior parent. So we will take questions. You can raise your hand. We also have some questions that were submitted to our office ahead of time. We'll come by with the mic. You'll ask your question. Again, we're asking for just like general questions, nothing individual. If you have an individual question, just please reach out to your school counselor. So I will take this side. Do we have any questions over here? Okay. I'm gonna make my way over there.
Hi, hello everybody. I'm Veronica. I have a question regarding the FAFSA dates, because for me it's like pretty confused. There are some dates on the webpage and there are some other dates. So my daughter today told me, no, it's something around December. And I saw something around September 15 from a state standpoint. So I would like to, clarify that part to ensure that we are going to be in the best timing.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that's the $64,000 question right now in admissions. So depending upon what search you do, you'll get various updated information. There is no released FAFSA right now. So even the experts have not seen this new simplified FAFSA that we are all hearing about. Our understanding is that it will be available to families in December. It used to be that on October 1st, you could apply for your PIN number and then be able to fill it out right afterwards. At the moment, they have not given a defined date in December. However, what we do know is that schools' deadlines start at around February 15th. So that's when your student will have to have it completed by. So there will be a window of time between the time that it's released and the time that it is due by most universities. And so what I would do is, as the students are making their sort of checklist about what they have to do in terms of their applications and when are things due, I would do the same thing when it comes to financial aid. Go onto their financial aid website, see when their individual deadline is, and then just record that so that that way you know, okay, for this school we have until February 15th. For that school, maybe we have until March 1st. So it gives you an idea of how long you have to fill it out. Again, as we said earlier in the presentation, the goal is that it's supposed to be a simplified document that should take us less time to fill out. I mean, fingers crossed, because I have to do it too this year, so I'm very hopeful that it will be easier than it's been in past years. But we really, unfortunately, do not have too much detail about it, as no one has actually seen the final document.
Okay. Do we have any other? Oh, great. Okay. Oh, great. All on my side. Okay. Hi.
So I think in line with the another FAFSA question is because the simplified version won't be available until later, what, if any, impact will that have on like early action applications and the possibility of having the FAFSA information considered for merit scholarships?
Say that? It sort of relates to what I just said. So in terms of how it will have an impact, so, early action schools are, of course, not binding, right? So you're applying early action, you're applying somewhere around November 1st or 15th, generally. Some of them are December 1st. But, and then they're usually releasing prior to the holiday break, so usually sometime in mid-December. It's not going to have an impact on their timeline. They're still going to accept applications when they accept them, provide decisions when they provide them. What they won't be able to do is what they've done in past years, where they've been able to give a snapshot of aid at that point. But because for early action, you don't need to provide a response as a student or a family until May, you really don't need to worry about what the aid is going to be. And with early decision, you really have to make the determination that aid notwithstanding, you're applying to that school, right? So students are making that commitment with an early decision school, with or without knowing the aid offered. So it shouldn't really have an impact on college admissions or decisions. It just may have an impact for students on how long they will wait before they commit to someplace. They may decide to wait a little bit longer in the process until they have a full picture of what they're being offered from the individual schools.
Okay, I saw some hands over here.
Hi. How important is the 2 recommendation from your teachers for your applications? We find we keep encouraging our son to get two recommendations, and he only really has one that he feels confident about. Like, I don't know what the type of relationship he thinks he needs to have with these teachers is, but.
So I would say at this point, with the applications released on August 1st, when you log into the Common App and you enter a college into the list, the student can click on the college's name when they go into the My List tab of the Common App. And in the middle of the page, it's going to show how many letters of recommendation are required. And then it'll also show how many they will accept that are optional. So typically, only the most selective colleges in the country are requiring 2 letters. Most colleges want to see 1 letter, and then there are some schools that don't want to read any, and they will not allow a student to submit any letters at all. So I wouldn't say now, at this point, they have to have that second letter if their list doesn't require it, and that's the way that they can check that. With that being said, the counselor letter will go to every single school, with the exception of, I think, 1 where you only get to send 1 letter, and so then the student has to decide if it's going to be a teacher letter or the counselor letter. Otherwise, some of the schools will also allow character references, but again, within the character references, they also indicate what type of person can be writing for them, but all that information is now released on the actual application in the Common App, and it varies college by college.
The college admission officer visits at Ridge, are those set for the year, or do you keep adding them throughout the fall?
They keep adding them, so we don't even have our assignments yet for October and November, so we only have them through September. So the secretaries up front manage that process, and then the calendar gets released to the community.
Hi, for the self-reported academic record, pretty much on the transcript, it's 1 grade per class, but for PE and health, there are 4. So are you actually reporting 4 separate grades for PE and health? There isn't 1 annual grade for both.
Yeah, I would say for the SRAR that it's probably best for the students to list each one separately. Some colleges may decide to wipe out all of those grades when they're recalculating GPA. At Ridge, we calculate only health into the GPA, which they'll know from reading our program of studies and our information that we provide. They may choose to do something differently. So I would just have the student look at their transcript and record on the SRAR the exact thing that they see on their transcript. So for example, if it says like physical education, project adventure, I would literally write exactly what's on the transcript so that it mirrors what it is that the school will see if they're going to submit a final transcript to that school. So just have them do it by marking period.
Okay, then I have a part B to that question, because within the Common App, there are areas where they ask you for the grade and the class. Am I doing the same thing, or is my daughter doing the same thing? Is she going to do the same thing? Because I know she's going to ask me this question, and I'm going to
Interesting, you should ask that. So, hang on 1 second. Let me get back to the correct slide. So what I did this summer, because I had nothing else to do, was to go through the Common Application and think about all of the things that I would ask if I were a student filling out the Common Application. And then I literally went through section by section and helped to create this guide for students. So this actually tells them not only like what info they need when they sit down and fill out the Common Application, like you need your social security number, all that kind of stuff, but if you go through it, you'll see that I went through section by section and then gave them instructions on how to fill those out. So in the education section, for example, they're gonna select semester as the type of scheduling system, and then we suggest that they enter PE/Health 12 as a full year to save themselves some time. If, however, they have to fill out the courses and grades section, which only some schools require, we give separate instructions on how they should do that and whether they should choose. So our grading scale is A through F, although we're A through E, but we're like the only humans on earth that do that, so just select A through F. And then for schedule, they're gonna choose yearly, and I even noted this is different than the education section above. So in that, they're going to enter it yearly, and then they can actually still enter it marking period by marking period, even though they've entered it yearly. So when they get into it, they'll see that, but they can also ask us. So your student can come in and ask their counselor, like, am I doing this correctly? Yeah. And then we're having a separate section for the SRAR during lunch, where we're actually having a rep from Rutgers come in and talk to the kids about like commonly done errors on the SRAR and how they can avoid those errors, and it's going to be like a working session, so they can open the SRAR on their computer and work through it. So there's basically, these are the 3 places that they have to record information, right? So the courses and grades section, if it's required of them, the education section, and then also the SRAR. So hopefully between this website and the support that we'll provide them in that lunch session, they'll get their questions answered.
Thank you for the great job you're doing tonight. I'm grateful for this. My question is, should parents have a role in reading and offering feedback on the essays and other elements of an application? What is healthy and appropriate engagement without overdoing it?
Oh. So the question is, should I answer this or should I give it to one of my colleagues? Oh, Lordy. Okay, so that's such a good question to ask. I think it depends on a few things. Number one, how open they are to your feedback. Some students are like, yeah, I would love for you to read my essay. And some kids recoil when you suggest that you read their essay. So I think it starts with the reaction, right? If they don't want your help with that, it doesn't mean they can't get help with that, but maybe it means you think to yourself, this may not be the hill I want to die on, and I may just want to go ahead and farm this out to somebody else. And that's really where your child's English teacher or school counselor can be of help to you. So I would say if you are finding that that's the reaction, maybe reach out to one or both of us and just say, hey, listen, do you mind, offering so-and-so to look at their college essay? I really would love to have another set of eyes, and it's clearly not going to be mine. So I think that's one way of handling it. If they seem open to it, I think the thing that we all have to remember, and I fall victim to this as well because I read essays for all of your students, and then I also read, I've now done this for my own child this year. So I would say you have to remember it's being written by a 17 or 18-year-old. And it should sound like it's written by a 17 or 18-year-old. So you have to prevent yourself from making it be written by someone who is our age. So, I think that is the hard part when you're balancing that idea of how can I help you with this essay? Helping them with brainstorming topics, God, I have no idea what I want to write about. And saying to them, well, you're really into such and such. Do you think you want to write about that? Or, you are an athlete. Maybe don't write about that because it's going to be all over the place in your application in terms of your activity section. So I think that's where, as parents, maybe we can help them with thinking about the things about themselves that maybe they want to share. I have kids all the time say, there is nothing interesting about me. I have nothing to write about. I'm so not interesting. And so I think that might be where you can help them, come up with some topics or things that maybe they haven't thought about.
Just to add to that, I think if you find that you are putting a pen to paper, you might be crossing that line because now your voice is becoming part of the essay. So if your child is using Google Docs, you could use the comments on Google Docs to make suggestions, and ask questions more about what they should be thinking about rather than, the temptation of, rewriting parts or editing out, full statements. Because the colleges do recognize that. When they read an essay and it sounds like a pretty high-level writing, they're going to look at the transcript, they're going to look at the coursework, and then they also can recognize, the voice of an adult. They have a code, DDI, so Daddy Did It, and so that's kind of what they're looking at. And in that case, it's not really helping your student because they're most likely going to put it aside because it's not going to be authentic work. And so I think, the same is true, and if you hire someone from the outside to help the student, as a department, I think we've gotten pretty good at recognizing some work of various maybe tutors where it's written by a 50-year-old woman and it sounds like it is. And so you just want to be careful with that too. Make sure, it reflects your son or daughter. I think especially if it's a 16, 17-year-old boy. So just something to think about.
If you could show us back again that application that you had, the GPA on a scale up to 4 is what most colleges want to see, but our GPA is weighted. So how do you convert one back to another?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what you're talking about is the GPA scale that we have. So we have a 4.0 weighted scale. And there are all sorts of scales across the country. There are people who have 5.0 weighted, which means that their GPAs actually go up to almost 6. So it just depends on the high school and how some schools actually use numerical. They don't use A, B, C, D. So it can be very different in terms of how they'll see a transcript and what they'll see in terms of a GPA. So that is why a lot of schools have started using an SR, AR, and I can't say like tons of schools, but I would say especially large schools, because I think what they want to do is get it all onto whatever scale they want to use in terms of evaluating. So we provide a 4.0 weighted, but we also explain that we provide a 4.0 weighted. If a school wants to unweight a GPA, they're simply going to unweight the GPA. Most schools don't unweight completely, however, because unweighting is also like not necessarily an appropriate way of considering a GPA. If you took an AP course and earned an A, that really isn't the same thing as taking a CP course and earning an A. So typically, schools have ways of converting GPAs into a scale that works for them while also recognizing that the levels are different. So we indicate what our scale is. The schools utilize that information as well as the rest of the information in our profile about what courses we have available to students in order to determine how to compare that student to students from other schools. So we're not the only ones who have like a GPA that says a 4.0 weighted, and yet people can go up to like a 4.9 something or other. That's not an unusual situation. So schools will individually determine how they will convert that so that they can utilize it themselves. They're asking what we use and what the GPA is. So when you fill it out, you will say, here is my GPA on a 4.0 weighted scale.
Okay, great. Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to go back to the essay question. My understanding is that they're working on the essays next week in English. Like, how far along do you think they'll get in that process? And, I mean, is that enough?
Anyone else want to say that?
I mean, I think each English teacher starts it at, different stages. I don't know if it's a set curriculum based on the level, whether it's college prep, honors, or AP. But we do know that all the English teachers for seniors are going to be working on the essays with the students. And then they do workshopping on it. They meet with those teachers. Some of them do different types of peer editing as well. So it's just part of the English curriculum. And then all the counselors are available, to work with the students as well through those individual student meetings that we have. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and also I think it's a good time to kind of highlight one of the workshops that we're offering. This is like our new thing this year, is an essay writing workshop too. Ms. Cahill's offering it, I think it's this week, right? This week.
On Thursday, yeah.
Students can sign up. They can go during lunchtime and kind of get some support there as well. So there's a lot of support available for essay writing.
And really the answer about like, is it helpful for them to be doing it in class, and do they need to be working on that before or during their own time, sort of relies on what their own deadlines are, right? So like if they have rolling decision schools or earlier deadlines, there are some schools with October 15th deadlines, for example. For those students, waiting to turn that into their English teacher and getting back the feedback with their classmates actually might be a little bit late for them, and so they may want to seek out additional input on their essay prior to that time. So it kind of depends on the student.
We had a question here.
Ooh, that's a good question. So how do students sign up for the workshops? So there are links to the workshop signups in all of the counselors' Google Classrooms, and so they will just click on the Google form and check off which workshops they want to attend, and then click submit, and then we'll have a record of who's coming.
Yeah, hi. My question is about Naviance, the scattergrams and the graph where it says so many applied, so many got accepted. I'm curious where Naviance gets that information from. So basically I'm thinking if the child is looking at that, how accurate that information is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple things that students need to know about Naviance. Number one, Naviance is specific to Ridge High School. So it may be different. What they see on Naviance might be different than what they see if they were to look on like the College Board website or the school's individual website. So the statistics that they see on Naviance in terms of the scattergrams are Ridge High School students that have applied to that school over the last few years. The other thing to be very aware of is that the test optional policies that most schools have provided and maintained since COVID have had a significant impact on what college admissions looks like now compared to, for example, 5 years ago. So that is thankfully the reason why we're still here, right, is to work with your student on interpreting those graphs, but also letting them know, is it appropriate to send your standardized test scores to particular places, or is that graph maybe a little bit misleading because it will have data from previous years where the standardized test policy was different. And also, there is no way on that graph of determining whether that student who is accepted provided their standardized testing to that school or not. So that's really where we want to combine not only the Naviance statistics, but also what colleges provide in terms of their median accepted range for the SAT or the ACT. And I would tell you, you will probably be surprised at how much higher it is now than it was 5 years ago. And that is just simply a reflection on students are submitting their scores when they're like icing. Like they're like, oh, look at this. This is a really good score and I want to highlight that. If it is simply an okay score that doesn't necessarily help them, they're probably not sending it. So the scores for accepted students from colleges are going to be higher than they were before because a lot of students, really over 50%, are not submitting standardized testing scores. So when you ask most colleges, they will say more than 50% of our applicant pool did not submit scores in the prior year, which means they're in good company if they decide not to submit their scores, assuming, of course, that they are truly test optional.
Hi, just to tag on that topic. In your expertise, what do you think is best if a school is test optional? Does it speak more to the student's ability to perform at a college level if they do submit their test scores? Or do you think that holding that back may raise a question if the college committee is looking at one student with test scores versus one without?
Yeah, I mean, I really would not be concerned about not submitting test scores. You only submit them if they help you. So if they are of help to you because they are above the accepted averages, you submit. If they are not, you don't. Again, with more than 50% of students applying with no scores, there's no way they can use standardized testing to compare the way that they used to. So chances are there will be students that they are trying to compare where one has scores and the other one does not. And then they're simply going to place more emphasis on the other factors. So the irony is the students with super high testing in some ways are more, like, I guess you would say, disadvantaged in this process because they may not be able to use those scores to compare across students. So having the super high score is not necessarily as helpful as it would have been in the past. Now, if you have the super high score to support your really strong transcript with your really strong GPA and your really terrific activities, then that's one thing. But if you're trying to rely upon the score, it's going to be of less help to you now, arguably, than it would have been 5 years ago.
I also think it's important to mention that, you don't necessarily have to make the decision across the board for all schools. So if you are, like, there are times where we'll sit with our seniors and say, like, okay, for these 4 schools, we recommend that you go test optional, but for this school, you should probably send your test scores. So it's not like you decide and you're maybe doing it the same for all schools. It really depends on the student, the school, maybe even the program. So it's kind of like something we spend a lot of time with our students working to kind of figure out what makes the most sense.
That's such a good point that Mrs. Traynor just made. And the other thing to be really careful and cognizant about is that when students are filling out the Common Application, it asks them, do you want to report your test scores? If they are not sending to every school on their list, the answer there has to be no, and they don't report them there. Because once you've reported them, you've now reported them. You can't unsee something that you've already provided. So what you want to do is say no there, and then in the supplement answer where it says, do you intend to apply test optional, for some schools you say yes, and then for some schools you would say no, and then you would send to those schools only. So that's one thing to be careful of, is students like when they're filling things out for everything to be completed. Like, it makes them feel better. It's like, oh, I've completed all this. Don't complete things that you don't need to complete if you're not intending to send your scores.
Just a couple of things that I'd like to add to that. In terms of tools that you can use with your son or daughter when you're trying to help them decide whether or not they want to send test scores, is to really anchor that decision in the data. So Naviance is one set of data that we have, which is going to reflect Ridge High School. As you heard my colleagues say, you know, the numbers, what you see on the graph is going to indicate if a student sent their score or not. We may have a feeling, but we're all, you know, one of 8 counselors, so we don't know exactly what's happening across the board in everyone's office. But the colleges themselves post the information in 2 places. On the admissions page, if you were to Google the name of any college, University of Miami accepted student profile, it should take you to their admissions page. Admissions is marketing, right? So that's where most people are going. So they're going to show you some averages there. It could be the mid 50%, which is going to mean 25% of the class is higher, 25% of the class is lower, and they'll show like different pieces of information. But if you really want to see all the data, you need to put in the name of the college, and then it's called Common Data Set. That is a standardized report that every institution in the country has. It's not on the admissions page. And if you don't know it exists, you don't know to look for it. It's usually on an institutional research page or even an enrollment page. And then if you go to Section C of any common data set, every college is going to report a different level of information within that section. So some of them will be more comprehensive than others. Some of them will not have that information posted yet for the current freshman class. So you might still be looking at one-year-old data. But if you scroll down, then you're going to see the breakdown. They're going to show you the SAT breakdown, the mid 50%, the ACT. They're going to tell you what percentage of students who are enrolled at their school right now did send test scores. Again, that's who's enrolled. So they're going to give you that information as well. They're going to show you how many students applied overall, how many students they accepted, how many students enrolled in terms of making their class. And then if they offer early decision, you'll be able to see that, just exactly how many students applied early decision, how many accepted, and that's where you're going to see the pool is significantly smaller. The acceptance rate is very much higher, and then they're usually admitting 30 to 60% of the entire freshman class they want to enroll. So when we talk about how we work with the students, maybe it's a little magic, I don't know, because like you said, that's what we're here for, but there are tools out there, there's data out there, and that's what we encourage the students to use. I do still think a strong test score goes a long way, just because so many students are not sending tests. So those averages, I'm not gonna say they're inflated, they're just really skewed, they're pushed up. But what makes for a good test score, that's what has changed. Right? So it's going to vary from college to college, but some of these mid 50% are pretty astronomical because it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room. And even for schools that, you know, may not be the most selective in the country, they're still having very, very high averages. But I think if you have a competitive score, you're going to want to send it. But the other school of thought, you know, which is what Ms. Cahill was saying, is colleges want to admit your son or daughter. Don't give them a reason to deny them. And offering a piece of data that you know is below a mid 50%, right? So if you're not in that mid 50%, but you're below it, now you're offering data that they don't need to have. Okay, it's better for them not to have that, and then you use that test optional, and then again, everything now shifts to your transcript, right? And then of course they, you know, round it out with the other more subjective factors, but the majority now for your academic is going to go to the transcript, and that's where Ridge High School, as you heard, nothing here is standard, right? So the strength of this high school is going to carry that transcript.
Do we have more questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Come right to you 1 second.
This is just a clarification. Can you please repeat where do you get that the data, the common data set?
Common data set. So put in the name of a college, common data set, and then it should take you to a page that won't be admissions, and then different schools will have, you know, different years all the way back, and you can kind of see, you know, where that goes.
I have a questions on ED and EA. So my child told me that she can only apply to 1 for ED, but can she apply to 1 for ED plus some others for EA?
Yeah, so you do have to be careful about schools' policies related to early decision or restrictive early action, for example. But in general, students can apply to 1 school ED1, which is like that earlier deadline of November 1st or 15th. And then they can apply to other schools' early action or rolling decision. They just cannot apply to another binding decision, but there is something called restrictive early action, which does not allow a student to apply someplace early decision if they're applying to a school that is restricted early action. So they just have to be careful to read the policies for the schools to which they're applying to ensure that they are following those policies. And then some students apply to one school early decision 1 and one school early decision 2 if they are rejected or deferred from their ED1 school. So because the deadlines are different, and typically schools for ED1 release prior to the deadlines for ED2. I say typically because every time I say this, you'll find a school that doesn't release until after the ED2 deadline. But for the most part, ED1 schools will release in order to allow students to consider applying to a different school for ED2. But basically, in general, students want to make sure that they are following the policies for admissions if they are applying to a school with a more restricted policy.
Okay, we have time for just any more questions? Okay.
So I saw we should not, we should select, we don't like rank GPAs, but what about like the percentile? We just don't answer those questions, like your GPA percentile, if there's such a question?
Yeah, so we don't do any type of ranking on the transcript. Okay. So the answer would be no, we don't rank, we don't offer percentiles. But if you look at the school profile that we post on our website, we do offer contextual information so that the colleges are looking at the transcript and they have a sense of where that GPA falls within the class. So the school profile is going to show a GPA range, a breakdown, and it's perfect. It's a perfect bell curve, right? So few kids at the top over that 4.5, few kids at the bottom, majority are in the middle. Usually our middle GPA is about a 3.6, which again, that's the middle of the class, so that's pretty high for that to be said. So the colleges will get that contextual information. Ranking hurts students. Whether it's deciles, percentiles, or actual rank. Strong public high schools are not ranking their students. It's a pretty much standard practice. The colleges that are looking at rank are really looking at, did you take rigor and what were your grades? But yeah, we don't rank, and most public schools that are strong don't. It doesn't help the kid.
Okay, thanks. I have another question. So if school is not in Common App, should we also request the teacher recommendations through the Naviance?
Yes, so the Naviance site and the Common App site, while you link them if you can link them, meaning that the student is applying to a Common App school, if it's not a Common App school, we do still send documents electronically. So I just wanted to pull up, Ms. Murphy was just talking about the Ridge High School profile. So this is the Ridge High School profile for this year, and if you scroll down, it shows you the breakdown, the percentages per GPA. So it kind of gives them an idea contextually of how a student falls in the class. So even though we don't specifically rank, this is the information that schools would have.
Okay. Do we have one more final?
Yes.
And then silly question, since it's only 1 decimal point, are you rounding up? Like, are you using the rules of, rounding? If it's like 4 below, you're going down. Like, let's say you have a 3.96.
Right. Yes, I realize that mathematically everyone wants to make that a 4.0, but not in college admissions. In fact, oddly enough, a 3.99 is not a 4.0. Okay. No student wants to hear that, by the way.
Okay. Well, that is going to conclude the question and answer portion of the evening. Before everybody leaves, really quick, 2 things I want to say. Actually, 3 things. One is, on the bottom of this screen, you will see our Instagram, our new Instagram handle. So for any parents, guardians who have Instagram, we'd love for you to follow along. We are excited about this new endeavor, so if that applies to you, that would be great. 2 main takeaways. One is, our post-secondary planning site. That will be your first go-to stop if you have any questions. The second thing, a major takeaway for tonight, no matter where your student is in this process, your student might have written their essay. They may have already submitted their checklist. Your student might not even be sure if they want to go to college or hasn't even started building a list. Wherever they are, we are here to help. Please reach out to us, communicate with us. We want to support your student and your family as best as we can, and it doesn't matter where they are in this process or what their pathway is. Okay, we are here to help. We want to help. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. Encourage your student to stop in and see us. You're welcome to email us, your counselor, at any point. We thank you for spending your Monday night with us. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and if you have questions, please email your counselor. Have a great night. Thank you.